Hey everyone, welcome to the Skill Link podcast, where we get to chat and know passionate content creators, competitive players, and all the colorful voices who continue to make the Pokemon community incredible. Today's guest can be found doing the hardest of Gen 1 challenges on YouTube. DVs? No. Items in battle? He'll pass. Stat boosting vitamins? Never. It is the trainer who climbs the steepest hills you can find in Kanto, and soon to be Johto, our friend Teo with RBY Pokémon Challenges. How are you doing, my friend?
How's it going, guys? Thank you for having me. This is awesome.
We're so excited to have you,
Sweet.
dude. I mean,
Yeah.
I gotta say, so we were kind of watching, we've been, looking around trying to find people. We found your content, and I think the first thing I saw from you, the two first things I saw were the Magikarp challenge that you have, and then and I saw these at a glance, so I had to come back and I was like, okay, I gotta really look into this because this is awesome. And the Mewtwo challenge. And so
Yeah.
I was just like, these are so unique and so interesting. And so I'm so glad that we were able to get you on the show.
Yeah, thank you. No, to watch everything that I did on Magikarp, I think I've got a playlist of like 18 hours of Magikarp, so you guys would, probably need to take a full, day and drink some coffee in order to watch all of it, so.
I love it
Oh
so
man,
much.
it's brutal.
So good, dude.
Hail
So
the
good.
carp, man.
Dude, seriously, I feel like I'm a little Magikarp still in YouTube in the grand scheme of things. So, I just got to keep grinding. Someday I'll
Love
get
it.
to that mountaintop.
You'll be a
You're
Gyarados
awesome,
one day.
dude.
We'll all be
Yeah.
Gyarados one day.
Yeah, exactly.
awesome.
That's the dream, right? We
Mhm.
want to become the Gyarados. It's just, about hours of grinding to get to level 20, Once we get there,
Yep.
it's smooth sailing.
There you
I
go.
love it.
Love it.
I love it. So before we get into, we're going to be talking lots of Pokemon. Before we get into that altogether, we just really wanted to check, beforehand, like, what other interests and hobbies take up your time? We're just curious,
Yeah, so I've been a musician since I was a kid. I've been writing
Mhm.
original songs and playing the
Oh,
guitar.
cool.
I've got a, Spotify channel where I do that. It's a lot of bluesy,
Nice.
rocky, sometimes folky, sometimes Latin sort of music.
Let's go,
So,
dude. I got my guitar
um,
right here behind me.
oh, dude, what are
I
you
got my stuff.
rocking? What kind of guitar you got?
I got a Gibson Les Paul Nighthawk, and then I have a
Nice.
Schecter Hellraiser. So, and I got my amp right behind me. So you say that, and I'm
Heck
like, dude,
yeah.
that's right up my alley. So that's cool to hear that. We'll have to check some of your stuff out. That's really. You said you're on Spotify.
Yeah. I'm just Teo
Nice.
Barella's on Spotify, so I've always got it
That's awesome.
linked like at the bottom of my channel.
That's dope.
That's
But
awesome.
That's
yeah,
so
I
cool.
mean, I've
How long
always
have you
been a
played
little
for?
bit more folky, so
Dude, I love
acoustic
that.
guitars, and
Yeah.
started. I bought a flamenco guitar not too long ago, and have been messed around with finger styles and whatnot on that.
Dude,
So
it's tough.
yeah,
Yeah, I think do finger style stuff for like different. I mean, because you can do like just standard, like just strumming acoustic stuff with a pick, but when you get into like finger style stuff, whether it's classical or flamenco, it can
right.
get pretty technical really quick.
Yeah.
I have an acoustic as well, but I'll do some pretty basic stuff with it. But yeah, when you get into the finger style stuff, man, you got to practice a lot more. So
Yeah. Yeah, I
that's
mean,
cool.
like
That's
in
really
high
cool though.
school, all my friends were like shredders, like metal shredder guys, and I just never
Yeah,
had that talent. They're sitting here
that's
playing,
cool.
like, oh yeah, we're gonna play some Jimmy Page licks and whatnot, and I'm just like,
Uh
okay, I'll
huh.
strum the rhythm chords for you.
I'll be background. That's cool.
Yeah. So,
I
but
love
yeah,
it.
so I do that, and then I live in Japan, as you guys know.
Mhm.
I moved here
Mhm.
about 10 years ago now. I'm originally from the States. I'm Colorado
Okay.
and Nebraska, but moved here, became an English teacher here, so a lot of my time right now is teaching English and working at the local university here, and live with my wife in our nice little house here in rural Japan. So
Very
That's
uh,
incredible.
cool.
That's so cool.
yeah, so I mean, it's kind of interesting because we live, I grew up as a video game nerd, so of course I'm obsessed with Japan since I was a little kid, and now I
Yep.
live literally down the street from an old castle. I can just walk
Oh,
over and walk around the park around this old castle here, and um, you know, just kind of live that Japan life. It's got its ups and downs, of course. It's not all sunshine and roses, but I've been here for 10 years. Obviously, I like it.
It's
So
good enough, right?
yeah,
That's
To
cool.
keep
yeah,
you there for a while. That's cool.
yeah,
Are you learning Japanese as well then too?
yeah. So I speak pretty good Japanese, relatively speaking. You
Yeah.
know, obviously with a foreign accent and whatnot. I've got my
Uh-huh.
Japanese books sitting right here, but my wife is Japanese. And
Okay.
she told me when we met that she wouldn't have married me if I couldn't speak Japanese. So
So
obviously I
there
was
you go.
good
It was
enough
good
for
enough,
that.
right?
So yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's crazy. Learning a new
But
language is
yeah.
tough, but it's also, I don't know, it's one of those things where once you do know I also speak Spanish. I lived in
Oh,
Mexico for
nice.
a few years, and so it's just one of those things where I don't know, it takes a special root in your heart, and that language becomes something for
Yeah.
you. I was listening to
Yeah.
I look for Spanish covers all the time now, just because sometimes I just like to listen to how music flows in Spanish, just because it hits different, and it hits a special place in my heart. So I
Yep.
love that.
Same here.
Right. I mean, for me, I used to live in a little town in Colorado called Loveland, and
Oh,
Okay.
cool.
just down the road from where I lived, there was a used video game shop. So there was like a Albertson supermarket, I think it was, and then just like right off of that, there was this little used video game shop with a private owner. I went in there one day. I remember I must have been, God, I must have been like early junior high school when I went in there, and the owner was sitting there playing video games in Japanese. He had gotten early Japanese copies of some of the old like um what this must have still been like Super Nintendo, late end of Super Nintendo, start of N64 era.
Yeah.
And he was playing the games and it was all in Japanese. And it's like, oh yeah, I can read Japanese, so it's cool. And I was like, dude, I gotta learn how to do that.
That's so
I gotta get
cool.
in on these
That's awesome.
early action before all my friends, you know, because everything comes out early here. So
Yeah.
yeah, it kind of became a fascination from an early age.
That's
Definitely.
super cool. That's a talent, because I mean, from what I understand, Japanese is really, it's pretty difficult to learn, like especially like the reading as well. Like,
Yeah, they've got 4 writing systems here. So
cool.
they'll write things with the
Jeez.
English alphabet, and then they've got 2 phonetic writing systems. They've got katakana and hiragana, and then they've
Uh-huh.
got
Mhm.
kanji, which are like the Chinese characters that mean like
Right.
whole words, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I work in an office now where every day I'm looking at those and reading. And of course, I don't know everything, so I use some Google Translate DeepL every now and then because I'm like, I don't
Yeah.
know this
Yeah.
character. What does this mean?
What's the yeah.
Right.
Oh,
But fortunately,
that
video games are mostly done in hiragana and katakana, so just the phonetic pronunciation. So if you know the words, like in general, you can basically read what they've got on the
Right.
game. So I'm hoping to do some maybe green version content at some point and just
That would be
ooh.
cool.
you know, maybe sit here reading things in Japanese. And I thought about an April Fool's video where I'll just do a whole video in Japanese only.
That's a
No
really good idea.
subtitles, no explanation, just
Uh,
本日はマジカープコイキングのプレイしましょうのような感じ。Yeah, they'll just
that's
be like, what?
incredible. Huh? All the comments
I'd
are
have
just
to
like,
script it all out, you know, in order to do
yeah.
it justice, but it would be hilarious.
Oh, you could
That'd
make
be
that definitely
amazing.
believable. That's incredible.
Yeah.
That's so
Man.
But
cool.
yeah, I mean, that's basically me personally. And then, you know, I'm pretty open with my community. So, you know, I just learned
Yeah.
that I'm going to be a dad coming soon. So I'm kind of
Oh,
crazy
congrats,
getting ready
man.
for that.
Nice.
So, yeah.
Yeah, that's so great. Do you know the gender of your baby yet?
No, we're at like 8 weeks right now.
Okay.
So too early for that. You know, we
Mm-hmm.
got the news on Tuesday that there's actually a heartbeat. So that's the part that we were kind of
That's where you're at right now.
going crazy about over here, you know. So I made
Major
some jokes.
congrats.
You know, at the end of the last video, I made some joke like, you know, I don't know my baby what it's gonna be, but it's gonna be born on 0 DVs. You know, it's gonna be climbing that mountain with me. You know.
Yeah.
Level 0, it's not going to know
Awesome.
much, but it might know Charm, might know Milk Drink. Trying to
Yeah.
think what other moves
Milk
it's going to
drink.
have on its starting move set.
Baby doe
Growl,
eyes. Wait,
probably.
that's
Yeah.
later
That's later
generations.
gen.
Yeah, seriously. I mean,
That's
I
incredible.
can do the Gen 2 and Gen 1 moves, but I got to think,
That's so
But
awesome, though,
yeah,
dude. Congrats. That's awesome.
yeah. So I mean, life is good, man, and with the YouTube
Cool.
stuff too, life has been really good recently. So I'm excited that
Cool.
the fact that even you guys watched the kind of Magikarp and Mewpoof stuff is just kind of where I started launching off a lot more in July. So that's
That's
awesome.
awesome.
Thank you.
Super
Yeah.
cool. Also,
Yeah, go
oh
ahead,
no, you
Logan.
go. No, you go, Josh. You got.
No, I was gonna say, kind of a little bit more about yourself. I mean, you're telling us kind of how you got into Pokemon. It stems from playing video games at a young age, and let's just kind of more about yourself and your hobbies. Let's say you have a weekend coming up. No
Yeah.
plans, completely wide open. What does your ideal relaxing weekend look like? Are you a homebody? Do you and the wife like to get out and do something? Like, if you could have it your way for a weekend, what does it look like for you guys over there?
Oh man, so I like the Japanese hot springs a lot,
Very cool.
and
Okay.
a lot of
Oh, that's
foreigners
cool.
are put off by them because they're the ones where you actually have to go in, with nothing on. You know, it can be awkward when you first get here, but I like
Yeah,
them. So I definitely go for the hot springs, and
that's cool.
I don't know, like channels are so much my hobby as well as my, you know, I'm hoping to build it into something more in the future, but I'm
Yeah,
starting to just derive a little income off of it. But I think about my runs constantly. I think about new runs. So I'm sometimes like mentally just thinking out a run. So I'd be like laying in the bath, just kind of like thinking like, all right, so recoil moves only. How do I do that?
Yeah,
Sort
yeah.
of thing. So I was just last night,
that's amazing.
one of the Discord folks posted a can you do a run where you only do 2-turn moves, so like moves that you have to charge up one turn and
Oh
then,
Oh
yeah,
hit the
wow.
next turn? So I did that last night. I think I went to bed at like 1 a.m. finally finishing it, the playthrough. And but I just think about random stuff like that sometimes related to the
right.
content. But if I can be kind of chilling, relaxing, wifey, just go and eat some good stuff. We're good.
There
Yeah.
you go. That's awesome.
Super cool. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's great. And kind of talking about that, so obviously we know you have a love for Gen 1 and Gen 2. Just kind of
Yes.
talk to us a little bit more. You kind of mentioned this a little bit earlier before we started the call, kind of how you got into Pokemon, what Pokemon means to you, and just kind of why you started making content around it.
Yeah. So I mean, just to back up a little bit more, like when the original Pokemon games came out, Blue version was the first video game, like brand new video game that I ever bought. Period.
Mm-hmm.
Before that, so my dad was like adamant against video games. So he would not buy them, would not anything. If you ever want video games, you're gonna save up your own money and you're gonna buy them. My mom had one of those really old brick, like gray Game Boys. Like
Oh
the
yeah.
the
Uh-huh.
original Game Boy, right? The one that's
Yeah, yeah.
massive,
Uh-huh.
if you threw it out a window, it would literally make a crater in the ground, sort of thing. Um, like, so I knew that when I finally had enough money as a kid saved up to buy a video game, that it was going to be a Game Boy game because that's the only console that I had access to.
Mm-hmm.
My
Mhm.
friend next door, he had like all the new stuff. And for me, my dad just was like, I'm not buying that. What are you talking about? So I remember Pokemon came out, and I had been at the neighbor kid's house, Alex's house. Shout out Alex if he ever sees this. Um, and he had Nintendo Power magazine back in the day. That's how old school we're talking, right? And
Nice.
Uh-huh.
before Pokemon came out, every week they were posting like a mini version of the strategy guide in that.
Oh,
So
it's
I was reading that strategy guide while he was like playing some other game, and I was just like, this is cool. I'm gonna get this game. And I got blue version because I already knew from that strategy guide that Porygon was cheaper at the game corner than in Pokemon Red. So yeah, that was my first video game that I ever bought myself, brand new, and I just played it religiously, just
Mhm.
obsessively. I ended up getting a Game Boy Color and the Game Boy Light magnifying glass
Oh
accessory.
Yeah, I know
yeah.
what you're talking about.
You know, oh dude, like the little kid under the covers, just like with that, playing video games
Uh-huh.
late at night. So yeah, I was just obsessed with Gen 1, of course, and that just led to, everything from there. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so cool. That's so
Yeah.
cool. And so
Dude, some
kind of
of the
leading
original attachments for the old Game Boys are crazy. Like I've seen some just random shorts or TikToks that will pop up of people like having like
Yeah.
there's like a lot of random like just stuff for the Game Boy Color that they made
Mhm.
back then, like a almost like a magnifying glass or a zoom lens for the screen. Of course, you had the lights. You had like a whole grip. You had like I mean,
Yeah.
it was cool what they had. Like I mean, not very practical. A lot of it just had like one singular use, but like just really cool, like innovative stuff that they came up with back in the day. That was really cool. So I
Yeah.
mean,
I
we can all
remember
relate to
Yeah.
that.
I had a stretchy light. I think it was probably a Game Boy Color one, but it was like
Yeah,
it was a light that you could like stretch and bend, and like you could
Ah,
play
yeah.
at night and in the
yeah.
car.
They had that for the
Right.
advance, and then I remember when the SP came out, and I'm like, backlit screen. My 8 year old mind was just like, I can play Ruby and Sapphire without, I can do it at night. And
Yeah,
Yeah,
anyways,
yeah.
that's
seriously.
cool. Yeah, just like mind blowing stuff. So that's cool.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. And kind of getting like leaning more into your content itself. So, how did you kind of get started into these solo run challenges where you're literally pushing yourself to the
Yeah.
max? Like,
I
I mean,
mean,
you're doing some stuff that it's going to be a grind. So, I'm just curious how you got into that.
yeah, I mean there's a lot to it. So, originally making my channel was more just for me about learning. So, I've been living in Japan and I've been teaching at these English schools here. I
Mm-hmm.
finally changed to the university about a year ago, but before that I was working in these little local schools. And one of the owners had said to me during an interview, so this is like almost 3 years ago now, like, would you be comfortable making content for our YouTube channel? And I'd
Oh,
never made videos or anything, so I was like, what? But I decided, okay, so I'll make a YouTube channel based on something that I'm interested in, something that I can just, use to kind of get comfortable talking, get comfortable, recording, get comfortable with different things. And so I started RBY Pokemon Challenges at that time as my first channel. And so when I was thinking about, okay, what can I do? Number one, I love Pokemon. Number two, a lot
mm-hmm.
of content creators that I like are Pokemon creators, obviously. J Rose, Scotty was around at that point. He was still kind of early. Um, but MDB, Madrybread, I was watching
Yeah.
those
Yep.
guys pretty
Yeah,
religiously at that point. So I figured I'll do similar content, but I want to do it in a way that's not just a copy of them. Um, I want to kind of just be me. And so minimum battles was where I started, and really just trying to figure out every single Pokemon that can beat the game on minimum battles.
yeah,
And then once that became kind of easy, or it became kind of boring in the sense of there are some strategies that are just completely broken at the end of the game, rap plus toxic strats or whatnot. It was like, okay, how can I upgrade this? Well, let's make our Pokemon 0 DVs so that it's harder. Okay,
yeah.
Uh-huh.
that's getting to be too easy or too repetitive. Let's make it so that it's 0 DVs, no TMs and minimum battles. Okay, now that's getting to be a little bit too easy or too repetitive. Let's give a Magikarp the best possible moves and see if it can beat the game on minimum battles. Let's give Mewtwo, 20 base power moves and see if it can still beat the game.
Uh-huh.
So I just
Yeah.
kind of kept going like that, just trying to make it more interesting for myself and hopefully
Mhm.
more interesting for you guys.
Yeah,
Definitely.
Yeah.
I love it.
That's cool. It's
Um,
So, yeah, I
it's
think
clear
everything's
you have a
just
lot
a
of
slow
creativity.
evolution.
Yeah, that's cool.
especially as you're kind of getting your grounding, I feel like we do on our channel along with these podcasts, we also like to do
Hmm.
hardcore soul links. So
Okay, yeah.
we get together, we have our rule set is similar in ways that There's level caps, there's no items in battle, things of that nature, right? And then obviously we're locked in with 2 Pokemon on a specific route, and then if that pair dies, or if one of mine dies in that pair, the other one dies on his side, right? And we just got done with
Right.
the Renegade Platinum Hardcore Soul Link, but it's like interesting as
Okay.
you're getting going with these challenge runs, really understanding the mechanics, especially of the specific challenge. And like
Right.
kind of what you're saying, it's sounding like solo runs have their niches, have their specific strategies, and it's just kind of cool to see how that develops as you get more into the game and understanding certain things about it.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. There are some things that you don't realize, like you knew as a kid, like, oh, I could do this, but
Mhm.
you didn't realize how completely overpowered they might be. Or on the flip side, there were some things that as a kid I thought were good that now I come back and I play the games. I'm like, why did I play that way? That's terrible. Um,
What was I
because
thinking?
like I've mentioned in videos before, as a kid, I realized that speed was like the key to Pokemon, right? If you
Mm-hmm.
can outspeed opponents, you can basically win almost any fight. Like
Everything,
it's
yeah,
just a
yeah.
massive advantage. But at the same time, as a kid, I thought a Pokemon needed to have as many different types of moves as possible so that you
Okay.
always were like super effective or at least neutrally effective. But then you end up with a Hitmonchan using elemental punches and not having anything strong because they're all super weak because you don't have the strats to use them. So you kind of like there are things like that that you dive deeper into as you get, at this point where you're a little bit more serious, where you're like, yeah, I know that the audience is going to say, why didn't you just use that move? Why didn't you do this
Mm-hmm.
move? Because it's actually worse. Like, so you'll do a little
Not good.
test, just to show this is why it's actually worse. You don't
Yeah.
want to
Uh-huh.
do the elemental punches Hitmonchan too much, guys. Get the ice punch and just move on,
Yeah,
I love
Yeah.
that.
that's awesome. That's awesome. It's cool how you have this rule set that you've built out. You have this scoring system, which is really really cool. You have that in the description of your videos and the about section on your YouTube channel, which is kind of what you base a lot of these runs on. So I mean, yeah, tell us
Right.
more about your rules, how you came up with those, how you came up with that scoring system, and then tell us why you mostly focus on yellow version. Obviously, because your RBY challenges, but you do a lot on yellow. So yeah, tell us more about the scoring system and then the specific version of Pokemon games that you utilize.
Right. So, I mean, the scoring system originally came out um now over a year ago. So it would have been like last year in August, July,
Hmm.
August, somewhere around there. I was experimenting with different ideas about ranking Pokemon because my big thing is that, with no disrespect to anybody else, everybody can just do what they want, but for me personally, I dislike when I hear a tier list or a ranking on YouTube that seems to just be arbitrary. It
Okay.
seems
Yeah,
like, the person's just kind of saying like, "Oh yeah, this one felt better to me, so it goes higher," or this
it's better.
one,
Yeah.
the time was better, but it felt bad at the end, so I'm putting it lower. For me personally, if I'm gonna rank things, I'm gonna take my own like opinions out of it as much as possible. That's just me.
Mm-hmm.
So I decided to
Yeah.
make a scoring system based on optional battles, resets, TMs, and what I consider to be broken TMs. Moves that can be kind of exploited or moves that are just kind of overused and kind of overdone strategies, in
Mm-hmm.
my
Hmm.
personal opinion. And if I ever use those, I'm basically just saying I'm punting on strategy at that point. If I start going double team, that means I don't have anything better to do.
I
That's
have
the
to get
answer.
gimmicky. Yeah.
Right. So because I've already shown like a level 5 Pokemon can beat the entire Elite Four with substitute, mimic, um, toxic double team, basically. You can just
Yeah.
Yeah.
solo the Elite Four with it. Yeah, it's not consistent, but you can do it. So if a level 5 can do it, then anything can do it. So
Mm-hmm.
all those moves just kind of get shoved over into yeah, I prefer not to use these if at all possible.
Yeah.
Um so basically I started with that. Some runs you have to use them because like Pidgeot is not going to beat the game on any reasonable level without using those moves. It doesn't have a
Yeah.
move set in
Hmm.
Gen 1. Eevee. Eevee has to use those moves because it can't hit ghosts in Gen 1. So you're going to have to go
Right.
mimic strats and bide strats and probably at the end rest strats and even maybe double team just to get enough turns to knock things out or to get the badge boosts that you need to knock things out. So
Yeah.
yeah. So I started there. Like, okay, what do I want to ban? Then the second thing that I was looking at was at that time I did my first Gengar full game playthrough without TMs. And
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
it was like, okay, well, if the top tier Pokemon, and not even talking Mewtwo, like, but just top tier Pokemon in general can beat the game without TMs, then TMs are really just kind of a decision that players make. And yeah, it makes it easier on us. Don't get me wrong. Like, you can do the run where you just learn everything as soon as you get to Celadon, basically. But for me, like, okay, how do I make it more interesting for myself by trying to pressure myself not to do that, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So, yeah. And then optional battles, I don't count them off that much, but it's just basically if you're grinding a lot, the score will go down. And if you
Yeah.
take like 1 or 2 battles, it hardly affects it. And then resets, because I'm minimum battles, resets are just part of it, you know? So,
Mhm.
Yeah.
you know, I guess I would put it this way. TMs are like the most conscious decision that we make as players.
Mhm.
Like, whenever we use a TM, we should be using it for a very specific purpose and with a very clear strategy in mind. So, like, that's a conscious decision, which is why I count them off the most. And then optional battles are kind of a conscious decision, but sometimes you might accidentally run into a trainer or something. So,
Mhm.
we can count them off a little bit, or sometimes you're just so close to getting through something. And if you only have to take one extra battle to get through Brock,
Yeah.
for example, that's not such a big deal in my mind.
Mhm.
Resets are somewhat RNG based, so I count them the least.
Okay.
And that's just what I
Okay.
had decided on. And I've always said to people, this is just my criteria. You can judge it however you want. If you
Yeah.
say resets suck and I'm going to count resets as minus 100 points for each one, fine, do it.
Yeah.
you know? So,
I like that.
Right.
That's really interesting, and I think it gives such a depth to the challenge as well because, like obviously, it makes it so that everything has a cost in some ways, and so,
yeah,
it really punishes that. I mean, not really punishes, but it does punish the overall score in the end, and like, I think it's really interesting just to kind of see your like based on your performance in a lot of ways, and also kind of the way you're learning and the way because you also have to learn how to use a piece. You have to learn how to use a Pokemon right, and
right,
so
right.
that's also kind of like what's really interesting too is your skill, but coming into learning a new, almost like a new position in a sport or something like that with your natural skill, and that's kind of interesting to
Right.
see how that adaptation, but with the Pokemon's stat line and things like that, can also all play together. And I mean, I think naturally you probably get an attachment to the different runs that you do and the different Pokemon you do, just because you're like, this is all I got, and it's interesting to see how that all plays into it. So that's super cool. I love that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, there are definitely differences in every run, but there are some Pokemon that you come out and you just start thinking like, "Oh my god, this Pokemon is so underrated when it comes to
Yeah.
solo running." Because a lot of people come into these videos with a competitive mindset. So they're
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
looking like, "Oh, Alakazam is top tier and competitive." But in Pokemon Yellow, it starts the game with teleport and kinesis, which means just getting through Brock is a nightmare.
Oh
And
yeah.
then
All right.
its moveset is so shallow when you compare it to a Pokemon like Gengar that it's a worse solo running Pokemon, in spite of the fact that you
Mm-hmm.
would argue it's a better competitive Pokemon. And
Mhm.
at the same time, you get Pokemon like Weepinbell, Poliwhirl, Hypno like clearly outclasses Alakazam in solo running
Yeah.
because
That's so
they
interesting.
have better starting movesets. They've got more balanced movesets. They've got the badge boost glitch. They've got sleep. They've got everything that you would need to just crush the game.
Yeah.
TM-less. Like, so, you get a tier list that looks very different from like my guy Scotty or J Rose or any of the other guys that are doing tier lists because they're based on, okay, how fast can I beat the game if I just give it every advantage? and I'm doing the
Yeah.
Yeah.
opposite. Okay, I strip away all the advantages that this Pokemon has. Now how
What
does it
can this
do?
Pokemon offer me? Yeah, that's cool. Because I know
Exactly.
you were
So
talking about how you were trying to find like what can I do to make my content that I'm passionate about without like just kind of directly copying a lot of what these guys do. Because
yeah.
like J Rose, Madry Bread, I love those channels as well. I've been watching those guys
Oh
for a
yeah.
while. But it's like what can I do to kind of flex my expertise but have fun doing these runs? And it's clear that you've done that because you're able to show um yeah, like inherently, if you strip these Pokemon down, what can they offer you? Can you look at these Pokemon
Hmm.
that maybe you had kind of this predisposition to think about a certain Pokemon, and like you said, people think of Alakazam. They're going to think of it in a very specific way based on what their experiences with that Pokemon were like in a different setting. But you bring an entirely different setting to the table, and you're like, hey, let's look at this Pokemon in a completely different lens and consider it otherwise. And it's cool because, like you
Right.
said, it's not just like subjective. This is how I feel. I had this one specific run and it felt that way. It's like, no, this is my criteria. This is how I lined it out. I'm trying to make this as scientific as possible, so to say.
Yeah.
And it
Right.
makes for a really fun process. So it's great. It's great.
Right.
This.
Well, I mean, in a lot of competitive OU Gen 1 Pokemon, like they're competitive OU top tier because they have weaknesses that are covered up by everything else on the team, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So, like Alakazam has a very shallow move pool, but it has great speed and great special. It can spread,
Right.
paralysis with Thunder Wave. That's basically it in Gen 1 competitive. But when you get into a solo challenge setting, the fact that it is basically hard walled anytime the opponent has an Alakazam because you can't do any damage to them because you're stuck using only Psychic and Psybeam, and yeah, sure, maybe you can paralyze them if you use the Thunderwave TM, but that's not a huge advantage in solo runs compared to competitive.
Hmm.
Like,
Hmm.
you just get really different results, and Snorlax is there, Tauros is there, like, there are
Hmm.
tons of Pokemon that are at the top of the Gen 1 ladder that just don't do good in this format. So,
That's
yeah.
cool. It's fun.
Yeah.
That's super cool. Flip it all on its head. And so to remind me, does time also affect like your score of them as well then? So like how long it takes you to beat the run?
No, I don't factor in time. I
Okay.
factor in everything else. Time is not my main priority. The
Cool.
reason I decided not to focus on time is number one, it's just not my personal skill set. If you're really talking about time in Gen 1, you have to know all the Gen 1 RNG manipulations
Mm,
in detail to get through Viridian Forest without encounters, to get through Mount Moon without encounters. Like
yeah.
that's speed running in Gen 1. And then on top of that, like for me, basically when I started out, I felt like everybody focuses on time to almost the exclusion of everything else.
Mm,
And you know, what does that lead you to? Well, it leads you to slightly over leveling because
Hmm.
you in order to get good times, you ideally want to be one-shotting, two-shotting, at most maybe three-shotting key opponents in order to get really good times. And it leads you to just slam on the strongest TM that you get at every point in the game because, again, damage ranges. So
Hmm.
when I'm trying to do a challenge that is specifically pulling back on that, pulling back on the levels, pulling back on the TM usage, well, then time becomes not a super relevant factor because people are going to be like, well, you would have been faster if you'd just done this. You would have been faster if you
yeah.
just done that. Yeah, I
Yeah.
know. Yes, I could have just learned all the TMs and sell it on and crushed the game, but that's kind of like the antithesis of what I'm going for. So I do track time and I will report on it, but I'd be clear to anybody, if you want to see really good times, go check out Gym Leader Matt. That guy is a
Mm.
beast when it comes to times. That guy's amazing.
That's cool. That's cool. I think Logan dropped out. We'll get it back here in a second, but that's really
Yeah.
fascinating. And we wanted to ask you, also about kind of some of the specific challenges that you've been having in some of your recent videos. Like you've done,
Yeah.
Ghost Lax, which we want to ask you about. You did
Yeah.
a Celebi and Mew challenge, some other stuff. So,
Right.
first one, what did you think about Ghost Lax? Because like normal Ghost is such a fun combination in Gen 1
Yeah.
specifically. Tell us how that came to be. Tell us more about that video for those who haven't seen that yet, because I know that's your most recent video, right?
Yes, it is. So the Ghost
Yeah.
Lax idea came about partially because it's near Halloween. I wanted to do something kind of Halloween themed. It looks like we're
Mhm.
getting our dude back.
There we
Come
go.
back, come
He's
on.
back in. Come back
But
to us.
yeah. So I wanted to do something that was a little bit Halloween themed, but
Yeah.
the problem is, when you look at the YouTube landscape around Halloween, what is everybody doing? They're doing Mischievous runs, they're doing Gengar runs, Ghastly runs, etc. It's all kind of pre-set. And a year ago, I did the Haunter run, I think, on Halloween, and it was like one of
Mhm.
my worst performing videos ever because people are just inundated with those
Yeah.
same runs, right? So okay, let's do something that's a little bit different, a little unique. And I had just done a cross-gen Snorlax run on GSC Pokemon Challenges between Gen 1 and Gen 2, and Gen 1 won because GSC is just Rocket storyline is just terrible.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
so I decided, so on GSC I did like the worst possible Snorlax with only 20 base power moves. I just finished that up yesterday. Um and then okay, in Gen 1, let's try to make Snorlax even better. What would make it even better? Well, if you think about Gen 1 competitive, if you gave Snorlax the ghost typing in Gen 1 OU, that would have been completely broken.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
Tauros's body slams and hyper beams are just, swapping your Ghost Lax, and you just, what are you going to do, right?
Mhm.
But it's kind of interesting because what people don't think about is in solo challenges, when you get to the late game, opponents have smart AI. I use that term very loosely, smart AI,
Mhm.
right? But what it results in is, for example, you get to the champion at the end in Pokemon Yellow. Well, he's only going to use Earthquake against that Pokemon because Slash, Fury Swipes can't affect it, and Poison Sting
Mhm.
is resisted. So he's just going to use his strongest move, which is Earthquake, over and over and over again. So you're like smooth sailing right up to the champion, and then you just hit a brick wall at the end. And that to me is incredibly interesting because up until that point, it's exactly what you expected. And then you get to the end and you're like, oh, wait, maybe this wasn't such a good idea. Um, so there are things like that that to me are insanely interesting, I guess, that maybe as a casual viewer or as somebody who hasn't played the games in a while or hasn't experienced, these specific weird things, you might
Yeah.
expect one result, but you actually get a different result. That to me is just insanely, insanely interesting.
That's
Yeah,
fun.
that's awesome. That's super, super cool. Really
Yeah.
quick, sorry, I had an internet connection issue there for a second, so I dropped out. Did you, Josh, do we want to figure like pause, like make sure that we got my recording? Just want to make sure that
Yeah, I think
last time
once
we had
I
this happen, it didn't catch the recording of the person who dropped out. So I just want to make sure that we're still good on that.
it
Got it. No
says
worries.
it won't say that until I stop it, whether or not that happened, but I think it gives me a link if you do. And I think because Mike was doing it from his phone, that it was being
Okay,
weird for him. But if you're at your
just want to
computer,
make sure.
if anything happens right after, then I'll just you and I can figure it out. So we should be good, and we
Okay,
can edit stuff around.
keep
So
going. Okay,
we were just talking about Ghost Slack, so you're good.
yeah,
And
yeah.
Yeah.
so yeah, I mean now obviously another one that you did recently was the Celebi Crystal and Mew Yellow challenge.
Yeah.
What findings did you think were the most surprising and most interesting from that specific video?
Well, so for me personally, the most interesting thing is obviously Mew, once it gets past Brock, is just god tier in Gen 1. It can learn
Yeah,
every single
Right.
TM, so it's gonna beat the game pretty darn easily from that point. So that was expected. The thing that I think I was most surprised about is that Gen 2 really, really hates grass types, right? Um, in general, like everything kind of beats up on them. You start the game against, Faulkner, and then you got
And
Bugsy, and they're
Faulkner.
just gonna crush the grass types. And then you also add in the fact that Celebi doesn't get any really good TMs in the Johto section of the game. And yet
okay.
when you
Yeah.
take out that Rocket storyline, just that brutally long, tedious Rocket storyline,
Mm-hmm.
if you just take off that time, the two runs are basically neck and neck. You've got
Wow.
Mew
Interesting.
going into the champion, or sorry, you've got Celebi going into the champion as Mew is finishing the champion. But
Oh.
that's with Celebi not having a moveset, basically, because it's still using Confusion on the Elite Four. Whereas Mew is sitting here with Psychic and Blizzard and Thunderbolt, and you're just, you know,
Like
you've got an
everything.
answer for everything.
Yeah.
So to me, that's kind of interesting that really, if you just remove the Rocket storyline, the two games are almost identical in terms of, I guess I would say, speed to get through them
Mm-hmm.
with these top
That's
tier Pokemon,
crazy.
in spite of the fact that Johto just kind of doesn't give anything strong moves. All of the strong moves are in Kanto in the post game. So
Right.
That's
yeah.
super interesting.
I'm just looking at Celebi's Gen 2 level up set right now, because obviously you can get some good TMs and everything, but it starts
Yeah.
off with Leech Seed and Confusion. Other than Leech Seed, it doesn't get any other grass moves by level up. And
Yeah.
and then it's Safeguard at level 10, Ancient Power at level 20. So of course you got to get your Rock type in there for your Grass Psychic Pokemon. And then you got
Right,
Future
right.
Sight at 30, Baton Pass at 40, which isn't going to do much good for you in a solo run. And then you got
Right.
Perish Song, which also isn't going to do much
It's not
good for
gonna do-
you in a
yeah.
solo run.
Yeah.
That's funny. That's cool.
Exactly. And I was running it on 0 DVs, so my hidden power type was like a 31 base power fighting, you know, and I was getting the Jasmine. It's like, what do? I guess I use, you know, hidden power fighting so that I can get through that fight. And I got through it, but you know, it's one of those things where you're just like, wow, they really did not try to give these Pokemon any strong moves. In Gen 2, there's a reason why when you watch Gen 2 full game solo runs, a lot of them devolve into set your DVs so that you get the perfect hidden power for
Mhm.
whatever coverage you need, and get return. Like, get
Yeah.
return and get that hidden power, and that's basically the second half of the run. And, you know, if you do 0 DVs runs, you're kind of messing with the first hidden power. You can't get a strong hidden power. It's always going to be 31 base power, hidden power fighting. And then,
Yeah.
you know, when you get to return, like, I'm kind of on the fence. Should I use return? Should I not use return? It's pretty meta
Yeah.
centralizing. It's pretty bland strategy at the end of the day. But in some cases, it might just be required. I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's super interesting. That's like really intriguing to see that dynamic that they would be so close, like neck and neck. And I guess was the criteria through the champion? Was that the criteria, or was it through red for the gold or for the crystal one?
No, if you go through red, that takes way too much time. But
Yeah.
through the champion to keep them as apples to apples as possible, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Super
8
cool.
badges in the champion, because otherwise, yeah, you're adding 8 more badges
That's
plus
true.
red.
That's
which,
true.
Yeah.
you know, I'm gonna do the red section upcoming. I, you know, kind of put that on the back burner for a minute with a couple other things, but yeah. I'm more hopeful when we get to Kanto, because we're gonna get Psychic right away. We're gonna get,
Mhm.
you know, a Giga Drain and other things that we have at least options, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
And also in your Gen 1 Scyther run, one of the interesting things that I noticed that you said is that focus energy allows you to like bypass the high crit ratio, like the high crit chances with Slash. And so you can use it with
Yes.
Swords Dance. So I was just kind
Yes.
of curious, like, what are like some of your favorites, or like what are some of like the mechanics and bugs that you use to succeed in these challenges? Like things that you use to like, because obviously you make the basic rule set hard, but like there are things that you've used to be able to kind of cheese some things, or at least manipulate the game to work in your favor.
Right. I think my favorite one that I've encountered in a run so far was actually the Muck run, where Muck struggles a lot on Brock. But I got a run against Brock where he was using Bide, and I used Disable, which is typically terrible in Gen 1. You don't get to pick which move you disable. It's only 55% accurate. So it's just randomly choosing one of his 4 moves 55% of the time to disable. But I disabled Bide while he was using Bide. And what that results in is a loop where he cannot do anything. He's just completely incapacitated while you just repeatedly hit him. And
No
the bot or
way.
the disable can last tons of turns. I think I got 2 disables on him while he was using Bide, and just
Just went to
beat him
town.
because it was like, oh, he can't hit me.
He
He
couldn't do
can't do
anything.
anything.
Yeah. Dude, that's
Um,
crazy.
So there are some mechanics like that in Gen 1 that are insane. And
Yeah.
honestly, for me personally, the Brock fight is like the most interesting fight in the game because of Bide mechanics. He's the only trainer in the entire game that uses Bide, and you can exploit him in just insane ways, depending on which version you're in. In Red and Blue, he always immediately heals, even when he's using Bide. So if you paralyze him, if you
Okay.
put him to sleep while he's using Bide, he'll use his full heals.
Okay.
But it does reset the damage that's accumulated to that point. So if you like accidentally hit him, and then you can get a status on him and get him to full heal, in a lot of cases it will reset the damage and he'll release energy and not do anything to you.
Oh, okay. I see.
Yeah. And I think they realized that bug in Red and Blue. So in Yellow, they changed it where he will never use a healing item while he's using Bide. So
Oh,
he has the
interesting.
full heals, 5 for his Onyx, but he will not use them until he releases the energy from Bide. So what that means is that if you put him to sleep while he's using Bide, you can effectively infinitely just keep him asleep and
Yeah.
pound him with a super weak Pokemon.
Oh, that's
Basically.
interesting. That's
Yeah.
so interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
Outside of that, the badge boost glitch is a huge part of Gen 1
Yeah.
challenges. It's only in Gen 1. Everybody always asks about it. It's just you get badge boosts, right, from 4 of the gym badges. But when you boost your stats, it will reset those again on top. So you should get a 12.5% badge boost from the boulder badge in your attack stat. But if you use growth, which raises your special, it's also going to add another 12.5 to your attack over and over and over
Interesting.
again.
Mhm.
Yeah. So you can become insanely OP with that sort of strategy. Yeah.
Does that work?
That's
So
cool.
I think I was using that. Yeah.
I guess this is like one question. Does that work in like trainer battles or no? Like I don't know if you know that
Yeah.
if the badge. So like if you're doing PvP, like so one trainer versus another trainer, does that work too or no?
I believe in Link battles in the original Pokemon games, using 2 Game Boys, it worked. Yes.
Oh,
Stadium
weird.
doesn't work. No. So
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
it's one of those things that they found like after the fact, and when they were making Stadium, they were like, okay, let's remove this.
Uh-huh.
But I think it's so intrinsic to the way that the game works. They'd have to reprogram the whole, stat recalculation model in Pokemon Gen 1 to fix it.
Yeah.
So they just fixed it from Gen 2. Yeah.
Really interesting.
Right.
That's really interesting.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's completely broken.
Yeah.
It's the real reason why double team should be banned is not because of evasion strats. Like you can get around evasion strats. But the fact that it also gives you that badge boost and 6 of
Uh-huh.
them, you're basically
Yeah.
doubling all your stats when you set up 6 double teams. So now
Oh, wow.
you can't be hit and you're like super
You're super
powerful
powerful.
unless they critical hit you. So yeah, it's insanely broken.
That's
Even with the
crazy.
Curse Lax run, I was doing double badge boosts, so I was using Harden and Amnesia in order to get 9 boosts. So you're like literally maybe 3 times all of your stats. It's insane.
That is nuts. That is nuts.
Yeah.
So we have a few more questions for you before we kind of hop into our rapid fire round and our shower thoughts to wrap things up. But want to ask
Okay.
you because obviously as we're talking, you do a variety of formats in your challenges. Min battles, no TMs, level 5 versus the world, who beats the game faster, and sometimes a mix of everything.
Yeah.
And we're kind of talking about this right now as far as things that you've learned along the way, bugs you've come across, cool mechanics that you've been able to exploit or learn about. What other insights have you gained about the Pokemon games as you've done these challenges over the last little bit?
Sorry, you cut up just a little bit while
At the
you
end,
were
yeah,
asking.
you're
Yeah.
good. Yeah, what insights have you kind of gained about the Pokemon games as you've done these challenges?
Well, I mean, I think the biggest insight that I've taken, and the one that I just kind of harp on the most in my videos and runs, is that movesets are far more important than just about anything else. Stats basically don't matter if you have the moveset. That was the whole Magikarp Godcarp run, was about the fact that even some of the weakest Pokemon would be top tier if you gave them moves.
Yeah.
If you just exploited everything that you can in Gen 1 with, speed and badge boost glitch and sleep, they would be completely overpowered. So, like, I guess the biggest thing that I've learned is in my runs personally is just to look at Pokemon very differently than I think I looked at them when I was younger. Like when I was younger, I'd just look at them for pure speed and damage output.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a very competitive way to think about Pokemon. Like how fast am I? Can I outspeed you and can I hit you and knock you out quickly? So when I was a kid doing like link battles with just my friends, that was my whole team was just like speed demons with the strongest moves, even if they weren't accurate. And
Mm-hmm.
now I fall back more into like status moves and like Bulbasaur beating the game without any damage dealing moves, things like that. Because
Yeah.
it's so much more interesting to realize just how broken some of these mechanics are. And, you know, uh, Gen 2 nerfs all that. So Gen 2 onward, people who played those games don't know just how crazy these were. So, yeah.
Yeah. I love that so much. And kind of speaking, I guess,
Yeah.
of this bustedness, of this, just, your experience with the games. What was a Pokemon that has surprised you in a run? And then what was one that was harder than you expected it to be?
The one that was harder than I expected it to be was Mr. Mime in Pokemon Yellow. So
Okay. Interesting.
in if you watched J Rose's original minimum battles run in Pokemon
Mm-hmm.
Red and Blue, so he did it twice, and the second time that he did that, it was his new and improved strategy was to get the in-game trade Mr. Mime. It gets extra experience because
Mm-hmm.
it's a traded Pokemon. It's a psychic type. It gets access to good moves like barrier and whatnot that you can use in battle in order to reduce damage. So you would think, even I, after everything that I had learned about Pokemon, looking at this one, okay, we got our badge boosting moves, we've got a great typing, we've got a good move pool. This
Yeah.
Pokemon should just crush. And I ended up at the end, kind of jokingly, of course, but just saying, I hate Mr. Mime so much because in Pokemon Yellow, he just gets destroyed. Pokemon Red and Blue, you can do the no TMs thing. Pokemon Yellow, you
Yeah.
try to do that. Oh my god. Oh my god. He gets all the way to the champion and gets crushed completely. We're talking
Wow.
hours of resets.
That's crazy.
So yeah, that one was surprising just how bad it was, honestly. It kind of turned my, even with everything that I know, it kind of made me reevaluate, okay, what is actually a good Pokemon? Where are these cutoffs that are going to come
Mm-hmm.
in? Um, a Pokemon that has surprised me how insanely good it is, I would say Ivysaur.
Oh.
The
Okay.
reason is because Venusaur cannot beat the game of Pokemon Yellow on minimum battles without TMs. Ivysaur
Okay.
can. And the reason
Interesting.
it comes down to is that evolved Pokemon learn their level up moves later, right? It's
Okay.
the
Mhm.
kind of way that they balanced out the game. And when you're doing these minimum battles runs, you don't have the option to go fight a bunch of extra trainers. So you got to manage your rare candies, you got to manage your levels, you got to kind of route sometimes to get a key move. And Ivysaur can just get access to sleep powder and growth early enough to get through opponents like Koga in Pokemon Yellow,
Oh.
where Venusaur does not get the levels to get those moves. So Ivysaur in a minimum battles run beats Venusaur,
That's
which to me
crazy.
is just
Super
insanely
interesting.
interesting.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's like one of those things,
Yeah.
like one of those facts that I like. Oh, that's so interesting to me. That's so
Right.
cool.
Well, I mean, everybody started the game with, a Bulbasaur, right? When we first played Red and Blue, like that was
Yeah.
literally in the strategy guide. They're like, we recommend Bulbasaur. It's
Uh-huh.
it's
Uh-huh.
written in there. So everybody did it. And, so everybody just rushes to get Venusaur. And there's actually a
Hmm.
situation where Venusaur is not the answer. Even if you
Mm-hmm.
started with the Bulbasaur and leveled up through the game, you would want to delay the Venusaur until after Koga.
Oh, interesting.
That's
That's so
interesting.
cool.
That's awesome.
All right, man. This has been some meaty, some really good stuff with your content. Like I could talk about
Yeah.
this for hours, but obviously we can't keep you here for
Cheers.
forever. So we do
Yeah,
have to
cheers.
get going into some rapid fire rounds real quick. So this is just some questions that we
Thank
have
you.
where we will just kind of give you a question, and then you kind of fire off, the top of your head what you think would be the best answer. So the first
Okay.
one we have for you, in honor of your Scott's Thoughts Smeargle Yellow run, what do you think would be more likely to win a Yellow Minimum Battles run? A Magby or an Elekid?
Ooh, 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 they're both gonna get wrecked. They're both gonna get wrecked in Pokemon Yellow. You gotta understand, I have done so Charizard is the best fire type that I've done to this point.
Okay.
And it gets completely wrecked at Lance. It can beat the game on minimum battles, but you start like having to get multiple Hydro Pump misses in a row from the
Okay.
Gyarados to get through. So Magby is getting wrecked right there. It's probably, I mean, it's gonna get wrecked at Giovanni, but it's gonna get super wrecked there. Magby is gonna be crushed right at the beginning of the game because of Brock. So
Okay.
Yeah, right.
I think Magby has a better shot of getting to the late game, and Elekid has the better late game because once it gets to the Elite Four, it's going to be better against Lorelei. It's
Lorelei.
going to be better against Lance.
Lance, yeah. And even the champion too. With
Yeah.
Pidgeot and
So
whatever his water type is, yeah.
I mean, I'd have to go Elekid in the end, but who knows? That's a backport run to try.
That's cool. That's cool.
Yeah.
All right, one more rapid fire, just off the top of your head. What is your favorite Gen 1 or Gen 2 Pokemon cry?
Pokemon Cry.
Or one that just pops to the front of your head where you're like, that's so weird, but I love it.
Pokemon Cry. I don't even play with cries on anymore.
Oh, yeah,
I
okay.
don't play with the game audio on. I'm trying to think. Which was it? I have the sound in my head, and I'm trying to remember which Pokemon it
That's
was.
the thing. I was going to say, I don't even know how to articulate or describe a Pokemon cry to you anyways, and maybe
Yeah.
for those listening, I don't know how we could do that without sounding really creepy, but I know one that I know is particularly obnoxious is, I think the Weepin' Bell line. I think all of them have a really kind of prolonged, distinct one. For whatever reason, it comes to my head. That's one I can think of, but I don't know if you had one that you were just thinking of.
Right. Well, I think I liked the Rhydon cry a lot because
Okay.
in a way, like I don't know how to articulate the sound of it,
That's
but
what I'm saying, yeah.
like you send it out and it's like a doo doo or something like that. It kind of has that sort of sound.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I just liked that sound, I guess. But
It's cool.
yeah, I mean, of course, you had the Bulbasaur cry when it came out. So
True.
that was
Classic.
probably the first one I ever heard. So I probably liked that one a lot as a kid. But yeah, I don't play with game audio on. I do live commentaries as I play. So I've got music and I'm just
Right.
playing and chatting.
sure.
So I got to go back and review my Pokemon cries. Oh God.
There you go.
You
Got
can
your
message us
homework.
when you remember which one, and you're like, okay, yeah, it's this one for sure.
Yeah.
All right, man. Well, I mean, I just got to say, we have had a blast having you on here. I think we're going to end with a single shower thought because I know that you have an appointment that you need to get to soon. So just our quick shower thought here for you is, and these are just like not necessarily for your content or things like that, but just random stuff about the Pokemon world that we all think about as we're just chilling about. So a lot of Gen 1 Pokemon got an evolution in Generation 4. Which Pokemon would you give an evolution? Doesn't necessarily have to be a Generation 1 Pokemon, but which Pokemon would you give an evolution if you could?
A Pokemon that needs an evolution that hasn't gotten one, right? That is a darn good question. A darn good question.
Whether it's one that you think needs to be more powerful, or just because you think it's cool and you want to see it get another stage, any reason at all.
Right. Ooh, goodness gracious me. What would I want to see? And we're not talking like mega evolutions, right? So
You could
like
do
some things have gotten megas,
you could
because
do
they got to
megas
like
if you
mega
want.
Mewtwo's
Yeah,
and whatnot.
if you want to
Yeah,
do
if
a
you want
mega,
us to
go
definitely
for
do
it.
Mega.
But I mean, if they were ever to do a mega of a Pokemon, and this will show how much of a noob I am when it comes to later
It's all
gens, that
good,
I
bro.
don't necessarily know everything that's gotten a mega. But I guess I would say that just my personal feeling is that in the early gens of Pokemon, there were certain Pokemon that just got no love and just kind of got completely crushed by the fact that they just didn't have a moveset. So like I
Mhm.
know later on they came out with Porygon 2 to kind of fix that. I mentioned Porygon way back at the beginning.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you know, like I always felt like Porygon could use even another step. Like it's an AI based Pokemon, so it should always be getting
Yeah.
an upgrade, I feel like. Um
There you go.
so that's one that I would definitely say.
I love that.
Um and honestly, I guess my personal favorite like early game Pokemon when I was a kid was the Primeape, Mankey line.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was a kid, and I know they've started doing like regional variants and whatnot, so you can get different typings and whatnot on them. But I always felt like in Gen 1, like you get certain Pokemon that only get a second stage evolution, and some Pokemon
Mm-hmm.
get a third stage evolution. And in
Right.
some ways it kind of felt to me like, man, if I could get somehow Primeape to have another stage and somehow gain an extra typing or something, that would be
Yeah.
incredible. You know?
Yeah.
Like, because it's just a pure fighting type, but man, if you gave Primeape like a fighting plus, I don't know, what would I give it? What would I give a Primeape? Oh man, they need a rage type.
Yeah.
But no, seriously. I mean, and
That's
people
awesome.
talk about new typings all the time. Like I watched Scott's thoughts talking about they need a sound type and whatnot. No, I need a
Yeah.
Yeah.
rage type,
Yeah.
a berserk type, you know.
Light type. Yeah.
Ooh.
I've heard some cool custom ideas out there.
Oh
That would be
yeah.
really fun to see. There's some
But
fun ones.
I mean, those are probably my best ideas off the top of my head.
That's
I
good.
love
I
it.
know we put you on the spot with that, but that was perfect. So,
I love
No,
no,
it.
yeah,
no.
we again we certainly appreciate it again for and taking some time out of your day to chat with us. So before we sign off here, is there anything that you just want to plug really quick for the people out there listening? And then after you plug some stuff, leave us with some nuggets of wisdom, whether about life, whether about playing Pokemon in general, just some stuff to kind of also inspire the people. So and then we'll end it from there.
Absolutely. Well, things I want to plug. I've got coming up on RBY Pokémon Challenges. So
Ooh.
my main channel, we've got a Fossil Missing No race. And I know people are going to say
Ooh,
Fossil Missing No, those are the same Pokemon. I'm doing the Fossil Aerodactyl and Fossil Kabutops. They're actually probably the most insane Pokemon I've ever done a solo challenge with. To the
that's so
point where,
cool.
like, when you research them on Bulbapedia, even Bulbapedia's article on them is completely wrong in some cases.
Oh wow.
And the reason I can say that is because we're using guys like me, Gym Leader Matt, Scott Slots. We use this software called GameHook that allows us to see the real time RAM data of the game.
Oh,
So there are
interesting.
things that graphically show on the game that are actually incorrect because they're in different registers in memory.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
there are just some insane things going on with this Pokemon, and breaking that down with actual data, with actual real-time RAM, plus doing the runs is going to be insanely fun. Um, and then I'm also working on the channel on a Bruno team challenge. This was given me to it by a channel member, so it's a little bit of a good chance to give some love to my guy MDB, who's one of the original guys who got me into the scene.
Uh-huh.
But I'm trying to do it not exactly like he did it, so I'm doing the entire game not just with Bruno's team, but with Bruno's AI. And he is famous for
Oh.
his bad AI, meaning that I'm about 6 hours in right now and I still haven't beaten Koga.
Okay.
So, yeah.
That's
And then
awesome.
over on GSC Pokemon Challenges, because we had the cross-gen Snorlax race and it didn't end well for GSC, it was actually quite close between Curselax and Gem 1 Amnesialax, but in the end, Curselax lost. So we decided to do the X-Lax run, the worst possible Snorlax running with a moveset of Mud Slap, Rock Smash, Lick, and Splash, because Splash was a Gen 2 event move. So Splash is there to
Okay.
keep me from using Struggle in any battle. And then the other 3 moves I have to use to beat the entire game, all the way through red. So
Oh
it's
my
insane.
goodness.
It's ridiculous.
I see.
I'm
Bless
editing that. I
you.
was literally cutting up footage on that while I was waiting for the email from you guys this morning. So
Nice. Nice.
yeah, those are going to be insane. I think people are going to enjoy them. So keep an eye out for that.
That's
Cool.
awesome.
What I would say, just words of wisdom.
Yeah.
Do I have any wisdom?
Of course you
90%
do.
of the time I'm playing a run and I'm like, this is stupid. Why
Wait,
does
what did I
anybody
just
watch
do?
this?
Am I actually smart? Yeah.
But I guess I would say this, like, when we start out on anything, same with me for YouTube and same for anybody who's watching with their own projects, we all basically start out on 0 DVs, if you will. We start out as the worst possible version of whatever we're doing. And we just have to grind and learn and grind and learn. And we slowly build up over time. And, you know, like, we don't have to get results immediately. We don't have to get, like, everything immediately. You know, I think that's kind of the motif of solo runs in general, is that it's about the journey. It's about how you get there. It's about how you learn as you go. You make mistakes, you go back, you reevaluate your strategy. Sometimes you stop a run and you go back to the very beginning. But, you know, we get to the top eventually. So whatever you're doing, just keep grinding. You know, keep grinding. You got it.
I love that.
I love
That's
it.
incredible. Very applicable. And, you know, as Teo says, we're as once we were all Magikarp, soon we shall all be Gyarados. So
Exactly.
that's how it is. And on that beautiful note, on that beautiful nugget of wisdom, we're going to sign off here. Thanks again for everyone listening. We appreciate it. Be sure to like and subscribe to us as well. We'll plug everything for Teo for RBY Pokemon Challenges in our description as well. Check out all the awesome stuff that he's going to be pumping out. So until next time, this is Josh Logan with Skill Link and Teo with RBY Pokemon Challenges signing out.
See you guys.
See ya. Thank you.